I will tell you a really funny story. So basically, about 2 years ago, I did a post, and I'd been doing a series of these kind of posts. But there was one post in particular that I did a couple of years ago, which was talking about CBDCs. Okay, so central bank digital currencies. Now, if you don't know what they are, I'll explain what those are in a second. But basically, I did this post. I was explaining what CBDCs are, the central bank digital currencies. So I was basically explaining that the way the banking system works at the moment is that if you do something that the banks or the government considers not even illegal, but they just don't like, and they want to punish you in some way, the government has the legal jurisdiction, it has a legal authority to shut your bank account down, but it doesn't have the technical ability to do it. Okay? They have to collude with the bank basically to get that done. And then obviously, that that has to be paperwork, has to be filed, they have to speak to somebody at the bank. All that has to go through. The bank can effectively make their own decision. They can put up a fight. They can cause resistance. It's not an easy thing. They don't have easy leverage on that. It's not easy for them to get that bank account shut down. Okay, so that's in terms of the government. But in terms of the bank themselves, if they don't like you, they don't like something that you've done. Maybe you've done a post on social media they disagree with, or whatever it is that you've done, they don't like. They have the technical ability to shut your bank account down, but they don't necessarily have the legal jurisdiction to do it. So they could close your bank account with them. And then what could happen is that you could take them to court, you could sue them, you would have some sort of legal recourse, right? So then they have to face the court, and then they have to answer to the court and all this kind of stuff. So generally speaking, if the powers that be want to punish you, it's not as easy for them to be able to do that right now. They don't really have the control over you that they would like. This is where the CBDC differs, okay? So a central bank digital currency basically means you have one bank, which is the central bank, like the Bank of England, for example, and they have what's known as a digital currency. So there's no cash circulating. Everything that you do is done digitally, it's done electronically. But the government owns that bank. Governments don't own banks right now. When we talk about things like printing of money, the government prints so much money. The government doesn't print it. The central bank prints it. The central bank is in control of printing that money. The government actually borrows money from central banks. So this is an erroneous idea that a lot of people don't realize. With the central bank digital currency, what happens is you've got one bank that's in control, and this bank is basically controlled and regulated by the government. They have the legal jurisdiction in the case of the central bank, and they have the technical ability. So then if you do something that they don't like, let's say they come out with a new regulation, they come out with a new law, they come out with a new policy or a new direction, and you just don't agree with it, right? They have some sort of agenda, some sort of woke agenda or whatever that you just don't happen to disagree with. They can punish you by shutting that bank account down. The government then doesn't have to speak to a bank separately because they own that bank, they're in charge of that bank, and they have the technical ability to do it, and they don't have any legal recourse because they're answering to themselves effectively. Okay, so that gives them a lot more totalitarian control, basically. So that's what I was explaining in this post, that what CBDCs are is a form of more totalitarian control. And I was also saying that, the West is pointing fingers at places like China and saying China's this communist country, this fascist country that has this totalitarian control. But actually, the totalitarian control is coming to the West, because all the central banks are wanting to do this. They're all talking about this. There are trials and pilots that are already taking place in Jamaica and Kenya and these kind of places, Nigeria and all these kind of places. So I had done this post, and this micro influencer from Nigeria actually picked this thing up, and he put two and two together, and he realized that this pilot that's taking place in Nigeria with what's called the e-Naira, so the Nigerian currency is the Naira, and they were going to introduce the e-Naira, which is the digital version of this, as a CBDC. He realized that that's what's actually taking place in Nigeria right now. So he got his Nigerian people together, he shared out that post, he took screenshots of it, he put it out on Twitter, and that post went a little bit viral, basically, right? That had some influence, it affected a few people, and I wasn't the only voice for this. I wasn't the only person that was speaking about this. It's just that I was able to explain it in a way that completely made sense and people understood very quickly in a place like Nigeria. And it's quite surprising, actually, because people in the West were not understanding this as well as people in the East were understanding it. And people in places like Africa were understanding this a lot quicker than people in the West, which was quite a surprise to me. But anyway, he understood this, he ran with it. And what happened was those voices started coming together. There were other people that were speaking out against this. And what ended up happening is that created a bit of a movement. There was some protests. There was a bit of a revolution. There was some fighting that took place. There was quite a bit of a hullabaloo that took place. And they basically started to resist the e-Naira. They started to resist the CBDC. And lo and behold, what has now happened is, despite the attempts of the central bank and the government in Nigeria to introduce the CBDC, it's not had the adoption that they would have liked. It just hasn't happened. So, which I think is a very good thing, because a digital currency, a central bank digital currency, personally, is just totalitarian rule as far as I'm concerned. Despite everything else that's taking place in the world today, and despite all the distractions that we're having of things like submarines and all these kind of things, and not to take away from the tragedy of all of that, but there are bigger things that are taking place in the long term that are going to really take away our freedoms and really shut us all down and really control our lives in ways that we've never seen. It's a dystopian nightmare. I'm more worried actually about the West. Places like the UK, Canada and America, the CBDCs are coming very soon to countries like this. And I'm not seeing the resistance to these things here in these countries as great as it has been in places like Africa, which is a huge surprise. And we're always told, these are developing countries and those people are not as civilized as us and they're not as educated as us, but they've understood the tyranny of something like this far better than we have, which is just ironic. If you have any questions about the content or the subject matter, the things that I've discussed in this video, then please sign up to my Discord. The link is in the description below. It's a small app that you can use, very similar to how chat groups used to work before. You can be anywhere in the world and sign up for it. All you have to do is sign up via Patreon, which will then give you access to the Discord app. It is a like-minded community of other people that are talking about the same things, but we can just speak openly to each other. You might have some questions of your own, or you might have some insight of your own. Come and talk to me, come and talk to others. We can share ideas with each other and we can grow as a community.